Welcome to the Cybersecurity Leadership series organized by CyberHouston. In today's live webinar, we will be discussing challenges of cybersecurity in today's OT SCADA control environments. I'm Umesh, Verma, CEO of Blue Lance and the founder of CyberHouston. CyberHouston is a Department of Homeland Security recognized ISAO, which is an ISAO, which stands for Information and I messed that up, Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. In these cybersecurity leadership series, we highlight our region's cybersecurity rock stars and bring valuable information to you, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. We thank our sponsors, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Blue Lance, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston Downtown for underwriting the Cybersecurity Leadership series. We love engaging in an interactive exchange, so if you have a question or comment, anytime during the session, please enter it in the live section, and we will try and answer as many as we can. And we are just like anyone else. We love being loved. So show us some love by hitting the like button and cheering us on. And remember to subscribe and hit the notification button. That way, YouTube and Facebook will automatically notify you each time we are scheduled to go live. Now, today's topic features the challenges of cybersecurity in today's OT SCADA control environments. There is more and more pressure to connect our IT production environments with control networks. We will outline the risks and potential solutions of merging IT, OT, SCADA environments. Joining us today is George Crawford, CIO, CISO partner at Catapult Energy Services and the 2020 Orbi CIO of the Year. Spanning multi-industry verticals and different executive positions, including concurrent roles as CIO and CISO, George's career includes 20 plus years of experience in oil and gas, private equity, and consulting markets. George has extensive M&A integration experience combined with organizational alignment, risk management, security, process innovation, and change management. He has acquired broad business acumen in startups, accounting, finance, sales, and operations. He is a strong entrepreneurial professional with successful startup consolidation and exit of multiple companies. George is the active board president emeritus of the Society for Information Management Houston chapter and serves on multiple academic advisory boards, including U of H CIT, HBU Engineering Cyber Engineering, NSF and Lone Star College Advisory Boards. He also serves on CyberHouston's Greater Houston Cybersecurity Council. Welcome, George. It's so great to have you on our broadcast today.
Thank you, Umesh. I'm happy to be here.
So, George, before we get started, you love to fly planes. We're not just talking about regular planes. Tell us about these fancy planes and what you do with them.
Well, one of my business partners flies planes as well, and he flies the nose gear. So he's tired of hearing me say this, but I fly what's called a tail dragger, and it's an aerobatic plane. So the idea behind that, obviously, is you get to have a lot more fun, a little bit more adrenaline. You get to do a lot of crazy things up in the air, and so there's two different ones. I fly one that has inverted tanks. So you can do a lot of things and have a lot of fun. It pulls a lot of G's. So yeah, it's a fun plane to fly.
Aerobatics, speed, adrenaline. I mean, what else do you do? It's all around speed. And I heard from a little bird that there's something else you do around speed.
Yeah, well, I've had the NASCAR experience and also the Lexus high performance driving experience. So you get to actually go on Texas Motor Speedway, and you get to do 10 laps with 10 other cars, and may the best man win. So it was fun. I enjoyed it a lot. So plan on going back and doing Talladega one time.
Well, I'm just so jealous of you. I want to kind of go do that. I had many years ago, I had a chance to go down into the pits at a NASCAR race. And that was an enjoyable experience, but I would love to be driving a car. But I better do that before I get too old and cannot get behind the wheel.
You never get too old, Umesh. Never too old.
So let's talk about Catapult Energy Services for a moment, and tell us about how and what Catapult does in this whole IT OT SCADA space.
Sure. Catapult Energy Services, I joined them back in 2013, and I joined them because I had previous experience with other private equity and venture capital groups that did consolidations in multiple industries. So when I had the opportunity here, I joined that. It's a private equity-backed company. I have 3 other business partners at Catapult, and we start oil field services companies, which back when oil was $100 a barrel, it was a great idea. Now at $40 a barrel, we're not exactly the favorites of Wall Street right now from an oil and gas perspective, especially oil field services. But what we do is we start oil field services companies. We started 5. We were lucky and monetized our coil tubing unit, sold that company about a year and a half ago. And what we're doing right now is going through, because of the oil and gas downturn that we had recently, we're doing different consolidations. Obviously, we have challenges from not just the supply side that was so high, but also the demand side with the COVID that went down. And so all of those factors came into play, where eventually what we decided to do, because a lot of our companies were downsizing as the revenue stream was downsizing within those markets. So we went on a oil and gas consolidation structure because we had a real strong balance sheet. And so what we started doing was basically looking at different acquisitions. And so we just finished one, signed, just delivered the press release 4 days ago, so I can actually mention it. But yeah, so that's what we do there in the oil and gas industry. And that, as it relates to the SCADA and OT environments, all of our equipment, one coiled tubing rig was $8 million. And there was probably 600 different data capture points from an instrumentation standpoint. So we had to make sure that, and I was over all of the OT as well, and I still am. So we learned that, the more and more that we're trying to converge the OT environments and the IT environments, there's obviously OT is a lot different, but they're trying to create some common platform for the basis of IT and OT, and then you have additional things that you have to do in the OT side. But the operational technology was a lot of things that actually helped us market our coil tubing unit as well. So it can be a competitive advantage. So it's not just we want to connect the 2 networks because we want to share data, which is the wrong reason to do it. The reason to do it is because there's a business-driven reason behind the connecting the 2 and being able to have access to that data and then do something with it, which we did again in our coil tubing unit by creating competitive advantage. And that's the reason that the company wanted to buy it.
So George, you have, you're using M&A to consolidate the market. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some of the risks and the rewards there. Normally, I would say that the normal way of evaluation is either some multiple of revenue or EBITDA or something along those lines. But lately, more and more cybersecurity assessments and cybersecurity due diligence is being done during the acquisition side. So from a PLC, SCADA, cybersecurity risk perspective, are you seeing that enter into the valuation of these mergers and acquisitions? Do you see some getting a bonus and some getting a haircut?
Yes, most definitely. So what you said was very accurate. So from a private equity perspective, I don't know if people know the EBITDA side of things, but it's a way to measure the value of a company and disregarding certain things. I won't go into the acronym of it, but the idea behind that is that's first and foremost what private equity venture capital want to know about a company, what their EBITDA is. And then obviously as you go through the due diligence with the other company, the idea is what kind of operational leverage can we create by doing this? And so a lot of it's financial to begin with. which is all part of the due diligence. But as you continue to expand beyond that, and then you get into the other areas where, you hear this idea about merging companies and acquiring companies and all the synergies that are out there. Well, they need to always put down potential synergies because they're not always realized through the actual integration of that company for a lot of reasons. Change management, people are a big part of it. And, that's why change management is such a significant part of it. But getting back to the OT SCADA side of things, the company that we just acquired, a lot of the different things that they do are very similar. They do, the different SCADA PLC things within their hydraulic pressure control systems. And so we had to review all of that, and we reviewed how they approached it and them as a company too, really, from a regular cyber perspective. What are the vulnerabilities? And as we merge the two, because whenever you do these things, the people that want to merge them, which are typically, at the board level and others, and as you go through that integration process, to be able to ensure that they actually realize those synergies and benefits, they want to do it within a very short period of time. So the faster you can do it, the better. So you don't have a lot of time for that due diligence. So it's more of a hands-on, feet on the street type of thing, reviewing that OT, the SCADA environments that they have, but also how they have third-party people involved and the third-party vendors that have access to the systems, just like you would in your own environment, making sure that you have things secured from a cyber perspective, because we all know that, the targets and the other people that get breached, a lot of that's through third parties and through a little crack or a foothold that they have in the third-party vendor environment as well. So those are things that you have to do. And the problem is a lot of those don't show up through mergers and acquisitions until 3-4 weeks into it, when they go, hey, this person, you cut off their access. It's like, well, you never listed them. Who are they? And then you do research, and they don't have a very secure environment. So then you have to go through and you do that. So it's really important when you do that basically what we do is anyone that's not essential, we cut them off. We don't have any access for anyone. Obviously, the essential ones, we do the due diligence ahead of time and work through that arrangement too. We give them access. But everyone else we just cut off. So, and then you bring them back as you verify and validate that they're trustworthy to be able to be in.
Yeah, trust and verify. That goes back to the very core of risk.
Trust and verify. Yeah, which doesn't mean zero trust, right? So what we had talked about before, the definition of zero trust means you don't trust and verify. You validate every single time, right?
Yeah, you cut off everybody's, and then you bring people back on an as needed basis. Yeah, zero trust. Let's talk about zero trust in the PLC environment, or the programmable logic controllers. That's what a PLC is.
Very good. All this. There's a bunch of acronyms, right? So
that goes back to my chemical engineering days when I first came out of college. Okay. But just as an aside, I hated chemical engineering, so I ended up being a software guy. But
there are a lot of acronyms, right? Between SCADA, PLC, DCS, ICS. So, which I'll tell real quick. I don't know if you were ever a member of NORA or not. Were you ever a member of NORA? It's the National Organization for Reduction of Acronyms. So that it's really valuable to be a member of that if you're in IT, right?
NORA, okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so from and I even forget the question now. So what was the question?
Zero trust as applied to PLCs and that whole arena. Yeah.
So zero trust is a fancy way of saying the way that traditionally we've always done IT is where we trust but verify, right? So we let people into the environment, and then as they come in, we'll validate certain things, whether it's credentials or whatever that level of trust is. So in a SCADA PLC environment, you really have to have a zero trust. That means anything that comes into your control environment that you already know who it is, you already know what it is, and you know the characteristics of it, you know all the different attributes of it. So when it comes in, you have that. And there's a lot of ways that you can even step that up now too, because what we do is we have a baseline of all the characteristics of those devices or whatever is going to connect to our environment. We have a baseline, and every time they come in for the first time and log in fresh, we compare against that baseline all different characteristics. So we know when something comes in and is attempting to be a part of our network that we validate that against. It's almost the same as a retina scan, quite frankly, because if it can't pass that baseline and all of the things that we have from a data perspective, then we don't let them in. So that's a zero trust. And the reason that you do zero trust, and a lot of people don't understand the significance of the difference between an OT SCADA control environment and a regular, IT environment, which is a production environment traditionally for their corporations or whatever else. If you get in there and you do something, you may get some type of malicious malware that does something that takes some information or whatever else. Well, in a control system environment, because of the significance of the safety and the human life aspect of it, if someone comes in and does something malicious, that will cause people to die. And so when you get at that level, different plants and structures, it doesn't really matter, but you can kill people within that. And that's why through InfraGard, that the SCADA PLC environments and the threat vectors associated with that are at the very, very top of their list, because when you can come in, not only can you, within our infrastructure and within the OT environment, not only can you come in and create havoc by bringing things down to where you can bring, a city's light system down to where the lights aren't working, or things like that. So that creates a hazardous situation. But you can also cut down production. So if you go to, like, for instance, the Stuxnet that affected the Iranian nuclear facility, things like that, you can actually bring down power centers and do different things, which causes a whole lot of disruption. So that's why when you start looking at it, and again, a lot of people are going to a common platform for the basic blocking and tackling for IT and OT, right? Which is what you want to do, because you want to be able to have a common infrastructure to be able to support it from a common environment. But you have to go well beyond that, as I had mentioned before, in the OT environment, because you have so much more at risk there. There's so much more that people can do and come in. And, Stuxnet was really the very first thing, and I believe it was the very first one, that actually allowed people to be able to gain control through cyber into physical devices. And once you can start doing that, once you can shut down a particular sensor on a boiler to where it doesn't know that it's overheating because you stopped the water supply into it, which is going to be one of the biggest hand grenades you've ever imagined, and a lot of lives will be lost. So it's things like that why you have to be very, very secure in that. And that's why, you have to have multiple layers, hierarchies associated with your control environments. You can't have them directly connect. I mean, you don't want to go into your server room and plug your switch from your production environment to your control environment. You have to do it very smart, and you have to do it one direction. And there's a lot of different things that you can do. So I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but those are some of the things that you have to be very careful of in that environment.
No, and it's good to get in the weeds on these topics, because that's what our viewers really want, not just up at the top. And so,
Right.
So let's dive in even into the weeds maybe a little more. So as you're acquiring new companies, or you're seeing, you're out in the services area and you're helping modernize some of the new environments, you're coming across, you can't just pull a legacy system and just put in a new system.
No.
So you have to have a transition period, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to run in a hybrid environment. So how do you manage those risks? And what are the things that are specific to your industry would you say are like the top 3 or 4 things that one should be on top of as you are bringing on or legacy systems and updating them, or you have to continue to live with a hybrid situation?
Right. Well, legacy systems, the things that we used to do to protect those is we had it as a totally separate network environment. So what we call an air gap, because you can't, I mean, theoretically, in theory, and this is the way it used to be, you can't bridge an air gap. So if you can't bridge that air gap, then you have a control environment that's secure, and you also have to secure it physically as well, because you don't want to gain access to it, because that's another threat vector associated with it. So what you do, and part of the problem too, Umesh, is that when you have a legacy system, a lot of times those things aren't documented very well. So you have things out there that you aren't really sure what they are or what protocols they are. back in, even in the 90s when I first started working in the industrial controls and building automation, there were issues associated with these smart devices that were out there that were plugged into our systems. And there's a lot of fancy things that you can do to them that no one ever did. But what turned out over time was those were vulnerabilities because they could do a lot more things than just a dumb device. And so when you go back to those legacy systems, that would be the very first step that you want to do, is make sure that you know all of the things that you do, all the protocols that you have, and all the different attributes, because a lot of them were wireless back then, and that wireless back then wasn't the broad spectrum or the spread spectrum, easy for me to say, that creates some sense of security within that. So you have to know, first off, and document your legacy system extremely well, because you're not going to have a lot of that documentation because it morphs over time. And that's the main thing with the legacy environment, and the complicated aspect to it is when you first implement it, you may have a really good diagrammatic representation of what that was, but you add to it, you change things as you go over time, and you never incorporate and go back and put that in the original documentation. So step one, make sure you know all of your legacy environment, exactly what you're doing within that legacy environment, and the changes that you're trying to affect. So once you understand that, and now you have these new elements of whether it's, because a lot of times you're bringing IoT into it in addition to the SCADA and PLC environments within the OT. So you have to make sure you understand the vulnerabilities of the devices that you're actually putting into that SCADA environment. And then once you do that, then you can talk about a really good integration plan to get those things into that environment. And as I said before, there's a lot of really good business reasons to do that, and to be able to go into your legacy environment and start doing things to where you can create some competitive advantages, which again is what we did with our coil tubing unit. We made it available to our customers through the cloud, where they could actually monitor things and in real time about what we were doing when we were milling plugs for them. They could actually be there and see the actual simulation and how close we're getting to that, and the real-time aspect to it. And they love that. So those things you can create competitive advantage for. So when you integrate those systems and you're bringing things in, number one, make sure you know your legacy environment. Number two, when you're doing it, understand the devices that you're putting into that. And then as you go through, when you connect that, you have to be very, very secure, because now when you're connecting that into other systems, where before we had an air gap, now we don't, because we're actually going to be wired in. Make sure you do it in a way that's very secure and over and above the top. And you have to layer it in a way where, your credentials are different in that environment than they're going to be in your regular IT environment. And you're going to layer it in a sophisticated manner to where the credentials and the different things that you're going to be accessing at sensitive layers, that is very, very secure.
So when you start talking about, all of us talk about resilience and business continuity and using cybersecurity as a key piece in risk management. Let's talk about things like when you have, I guess we have two storms in the Gulf, George, and it's just very current, right? And so we in the Houston area hopefully have already gotten used to getting prepared, and we've kind of talked through, and many of our businesses are kind of used to pulling out and working from home and running remote operations. And what are we not prepared for yet in our region, and where do you think we should be applying more resources on the resilience side from the whole OT and SCADA perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question, Umesh. And when you look at that, one of the things from a control SCADA and the different OT environments, one of the things that traditionally that you didn't build much redundancy into those systems because that's just not the way you used to do it. So one of the issues, because you said, we've gotten pretty good and resilient at being able to work from home and do those things. Well, unfortunately, at plants and facilities and manufacturing facilities and others, you don't really have the ability to work from home. So your equipment, everything that you're doing is there at that facility. And if you don't have the redundancy and DR built in, and you have a storm come through and you have a device that monitors something critical, then you don't have that information to make decisions on. And then there's also some systems like a ESD, emergency shutdown system, that has its own rules and actually performs functions on its own, independent of whoever the supervisory control environment people are. So when you have that situation, you have these storms come through, then you have to have that redundancy. And that's a lot of the different changes from a legacy perspective to what they're doing now is they're building more redundancy into it, more wireless redundancy, because the wiring side is very difficult within to continue to do that. A lot of the raceways won't support it. So what you want to do is, in that situation, the redundancy for storms when they come through and do that, because you still have to work, you still have to be there, the facility still has to be up, whether it's an infrastructure within a municipality, whether that's a plant facility, whether it's a power facility, or whatever that is. So those are some of the things that you have to ensure. And the other problem is a lot of those systems you can't work remotely, because a lot of times it's deemed too secure of an environment to be able to do it remotely. So you have people there. So you have to make sure, obviously, some of the logistics of getting people in and out and doing those certain things or whatever else. But the redundancy within those control system environments to where a storm coming through won't bring it down, because some of those things can't be brought down. It's not an option. So those are some of the things from the storm perspective and preparedness. And, because there's certain things you can do to protect that environment when, you have 2 hurricanes or 2 tropical storms coming through.
So let's talk about that. Let's move to the area of working with boards and governance and oversight. So from an M&A perspective, obviously we've discussed that. But when you're talking about upgrades, when you're talking about the risks and how do you mitigate the risks and how do you create the competitive advantage, how do you communicate to the boards around controls? What's that language? We tend to, as cybersecurity professionals, talk a very technical language. How do we break that down? And what are some of the things that you've been doing very successfully? Because you've been talking to boards, and I don't know if you can share the different boards, but you can definitely talk about you're being called in to talk to boards and explain to them in simpler language as to why they should do what they should do.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I was excited when you contacted me about being a part of CyberHouston. And that's why I really like taking that one document and be able to do that, because when you start talking to boards, I had my first opportunity to sit in and to present to the board in the middle 90s. And when I did that, I went in, and those of you that know me out there, I'll apologize now, but when I first went in and started talking to that board, I went in and I was so excited because it was my first opportunity to talk to the board of directors, all of them. And so I went in and I started telling them all the great technology initiatives that we were doing. And so I call it the 3-second glaze. When I started talking technology, it took the board 3 seconds to glaze over and start messing with their phones, because I wasn't communicating with them. I wasn't speaking their language. So what I learned through that process, and what I do now, because I actually sit on multiple advisory boards, but I also counsel and consult with different private equity groups on cybersecurity and what their risk mitigation profiles need to be, and how to incorporate that within their companies. So it's a lot of fun. But when you communicate to the board, it's not about the technology. It's about the impact. And that's why some people ask me, how come you wrote that one thing that said being a CIO isn't about technology at all? And that's not the main thing associated with being a CIO. Being a CIO, you have to understand the business itself. You have to understand the goals of the board, the goals of the C-suites, and those people that are in charge of the different vertical silos. So when you do that, and you go and you talk to them, you go into the board and you talk about risk mitigation. You talk about operational leverage. You talk about how to increase their EBITDA by 4 or 5%, how to make a competitive advantage that you can use to leverage that. Like when I told my board about the competitive advantages for the coiled tubing unit, they were all ears. They were asking questions. They were excited about it. So that's when you go in and you start communicating with the board. But that communication style is the same with anyone, whether it's a business leader. You have to understand, if you're going and talking to your finance and accounting partner, you better understand finance and accounting and how it's applicable and what keeps him up at night from a business perspective. And then once you start doing that and you gain his trust, then he's going to start sharing these things. That's when you can really make a big impact on the business. So that's why I like technology and the communication with it, because you can really make a big impact on the business side of things. So working with the board, communicating to them in the language that they understand, helping them understand the risk mitigation from a cyber perspective and what cyber insurance is. That's one of the big topics a lot of the boards want me to come in and talk to them about. What is the value of the cyber insurance? What are the reasonable attempts that they need to make to where when they sit in front of any type of litigation process, that they can go, yeah, well, here are the reasonable efforts that we made. We were knowledgeable, we took action, and we did what we needed to do to secure our environment to the best of our ability, as opposed to saying, oh, well, we didn't know, or we didn't know that was our responsibility, or we didn't know that we were responsible for that, because that gets you in a lot of trouble.
So tying the initiatives to the mission of the company, to what's the vision and mission, how does the action inure to the benefit of the shareholders, because at the end of the day, it's all about share price and protecting that, preserving the balance sheet, preserving the credit, preserving the reputation. I think those are the big things that I'm taking away from our conversation. And that's what boards like to hear, right? That's what their primary job is, and to govern and to provide that oversight. So that's awesome. So let's talk about, how do you see, with all the risk that is out there, and the risk landscape is, of course, becoming more and more expansive. And as the cyber attacks and the cyber attackers begin to tool up and begin to get even more and more sophisticated, and especially if now we are seeing people pay ransomware in large amounts, and they're beginning to look at ransomware payments as a business issue rather than funding a group that's actually a group of attackers. There's an interesting change there. So that puts a huge effort on us as business owners, protecting our business assets, and we need talent. So how do we do, and what do we do with our area schools and our area educational institutions? You and I serve on a couple of advisory boards at the University of Houston and HBU particularly, and maybe Houston Community College. And so how do we encourage our universities and the Texas Workforce Commission and other areas to really invest in helping us with the next group of educated talent?
Yeah, that's a great question, and Umesh, you know that's really important, because we've talked about that before together, and like you said, we serve on several different boards. And I serve on probably a dozen different academia boards, anywhere from, one of the things from an industry perspective, I just joined Shaw, and he's the president of Lone Star College at University Park. I just joined his industry advisory group, which includes some of the top companies. So I don't know why I'm in it, but some of the top companies in Houston. And so what he wants to know is, when we have a student that comes in and trusts their time and their investment in our university, how do we ensure that we are doing the best job we can to get them prepared to where they can be gainfully employed when they come out? Right? And gainfully employed in areas, and from a selfish perspective, STEM-based education, which is one of the things that where the areas where I work a lot in with these different groups. So working with HBU on their cyber engineering programs to help them understand what are those things that we're facing that are challenges within our industry now, that we can actually create, from a future perspective, smart devices that are intrinsically safe. And that's a lot of what they're doing. But to be able to go in and participate in that, to be able to get the youth and the STEM-based education, making sure that they're aligning with the industry needs, and making sure that the curriculum, because that's one of the hardest things in the world, quite frankly, for these different universities and the different education groups to do, is what is the curriculum that we're going to teach across the board? And it builds upon itself. So when you talk about a 2-year degree, and then a 4-year degree, what is it that we have to do to be able to educate them to where we're providing the correct information to them that is going to help us resolve from a community standpoint or from a U.S. standpoint, strength standpoint, to be able to secure our borders, to be able to do the things that we need to do, to be able to be less vulnerable from all these different threat vectors. So the students that we're doing that with, and that's why I love Lone Star College, I'll call them out real quick, and Shaw, he's one of the most innovative leaders that I've met. That's why I was really excited to be on his President's Industry Advisory Council Board, or whatever it's called. But to be able to help him understand what he can do to be innovative in educating these students to where they come out and they can actually contribute to the solution that we need, that's great. And then the curriculum, I also serve on multiple boards for a curriculum to help them understand what is the curriculum, what do they need to learn, because a lot of the different groups do the same thing they've always done, because I don't know if you know the process, but it'll take 2 years to get something through from a change in the curriculum. So how do we do that in a way where we can be a little bit more of a PT boat than a battleship in the curriculum to be able to train? So, some people may be teaching, I'll give a horrible example. So they're going to be teaching Fortran and COBOL, right? Well, that's not going to get our kids anywhere. That's not going to be a good solution for the future. So what are those things that they need to teach? So those are some of the things that we go in and help them with. We work with all the faculty, the teachers. We understand how they teach, what they're teaching. And so you really get involved in it, and it really makes a huge difference. And I can tell you in 2 or 3 different instances where it made a huge difference for them. And we get the accolades from the students when they come back, how impactful it was and how it really was germane to the roles that they were taking in technology. So being a part of that and being a part of the STEM initiatives within our community and through the different philanthropic efforts that we do, Umesh, to be able to help support those groups. And like Genesis Works, that makes a big difference in people's lives from a STEM perspective and getting them all the way through college, where they go from a 20% graduation rate to a 90% graduation rate. So that's the impact. And obviously, I'm pretty passionate about the giving back and being involved in the community. So, and that's one of the great things about being a part of the different organizations that we are. It gives you lots of opportunities to really get involved and make a difference.
Yeah, and you mentioned Shah Ardalan, and that he deserves a huge shout out from Lone Star. He's the president over there at the old compact campus. It's
University
renovated.
Park.
It's beautiful, University Park.
Yeah.
Great community leader. I also want to give a shout out to President Madeline Barillo, who I know is on, and she's over from HCC Southwest, and she's been a real innovator at the HCC side and encouraging a lot of cybersecurity and IT career development over at HCC Southwest campus.
Madeline's did a great job. Yeah, and again, that innovation and the different perspective that they bring to that, it's not just let's go through our classroom and the logistics. It's like really passionate about the kids there and what they're going to be learning and what they're going to be doing. So yeah, my hat's off to Madeline as well.
Right, and and then you've been very instrumental in helping CyberHouston with its business resources, in particular the cybersecurity for the board of directors guidance, and at HCC through its Southwest College is crafting classes, and we understand what that 2-year process looks like over there. They're actually going to take some of our CyberHouston content and make it available through some of their classes. And then the HCC corporate is looking at, and we had a session last week around how, for the business community, and how they can provide some of the courses from the cyber preparedness assessment work that we have done at CyberHouston. Right. That's going to be made available also. So HCC, Lone Star, I think these are doing a phenomenal job. And so we should continue to support that. And then I'll take a plug here for a moment, because at the Houston Cyber Summit, George, and you've been part of this, we have the Cybersecurity Excellence Awards. It's a scholarship award where we have $1,000 that we give to the best student that is nominated from the area schools, and we give 7 of those awards away each year. It is, of course, my personal desire to be able to give 100 of those away a year and grow it to 100,000. So all of you that are watching, and yourself and myself, we need to kind of commit to kind of putting $1,000 out there each year and keep growing that, because it's just amazing how that builds the community and builds our future talent. So with that, let's talk about CyberHouston and why you joined CyberHouston.
Well, I joined it because one of the big issues that I found in talking, when I go out and I consult with the different boards about, risk mitigation and what their responsibilities are, it's just ignorance out there. And when I say ignorance, I mean that they ignore that. They don't pay attention to those things. They don't know about those things. So that's why I really like, because, with CyberHouston being an ISAO, the whole purpose is information dissemination within your community, helping people understand that, cyber is real and the threats that are out there are numerous. So as a board, these are your responsibilities. Well, they don't know those things. And so one of the things I really like, and especially the iteration, the third iteration that we're coming out with on the board of directors and their responsibilities from a cyber perspective, that we're going to launch at our symposium in a few months. That once you start bringing in that awareness where people understand what their responsibilities are, they understand that there's a real threat factor out there, that if they don't address it and come and understand what it is, then because cyber is very much a top-down thing. If you don't have that as part of your culture, if you don't have it as part of what you're doing with your business as a whole, and it starts obviously at the top, if everyone doesn't believe in that and they pay lip service and they go, oh yeah, we're going to have a really secure environment and all these credentials and this dual factor authentication, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to have to hassle with that, so I'm just going to do what I normally do, then that loses its credibility and you don't have the benefit of that. So one of the things that's really valuable is the top-down approach, where with what we're doing with CyberHouston, we're bringing that awareness. We're letting people understand and know that there is a significant opportunity for improvement within our and knowledge level within our organizations, whether it's an organization or a business or whatever that is. But from the board level on down, to be able to help them understand what their responsibilities are and what they need to do to be able to be a secure environment, that's really exciting for me, because that's where it starts. And I've been through so many mergers and acquisitions. I've probably done 25 plus, where I did the actual integration. And when you do that integration, the change side of thing is very, very difficult to help people understand. You have the pyramid of resistance, which talks about the lower half, or they're going to do it because you explain what they need to do. But other people are going to resist that change because people are resistant. They have a resistance to change. So that's the same way with the board of directors. You go in and you talk to a board of directors that doesn't want to know about cyber and they have no understanding about it, and you're talking about it, they're going to be really resistant to that conversation, as opposed to people that are going, we need this. This is imperative for our business. This is going to be something we're going to ingrain in our culture. So when you go in and you talk to them and help them understand what that is and that information dissemination, that's why I'm so excited about being part of CyberHouston and the one PDF that we're putting together for the board and for the C-suite and for senior management to understand, how do you create an environment where you didn't have one before? How do you address the change? How do you understand what those significant things are? Because it varies by industry, and what are your crown jewels? They're different from industry to industry. So those things, when you get to go in and communicate that to them, that's really exciting. Plus, I get to meet really awesome people, and yourself and the others that are on our group, and the different ones that have helped on the different committees. So, and that's one of the things that I find really valuable is our ecosystem when we're in a particular role as a CIO. Well, it's not just the community as part of the ecosystem, but it's all that networking that you do in the different organizations that you're a member of, whether it's ISACA or SIM or CyberHouston or Inspire CIO or whatever that is. The more you do, the more people you know, the more different avenues you have of information and that you can share. And the more that we become aware of what our roles are as the CIO and technology leaders.
Yeah, and so, George, you alluded to the PDF, and that's the cybersecurity for the board of directors document that is currently on the cyberhouston.org website.
Right.
And we will talk about that here in a moment. But also you also alluded to the symposium being in October. October is Cybersecurity Month. And so for our viewers, those that remember that we have the annual Houston Cyber Summit, we were unable to hold that in April because of the COVID situation, and we postponed it till October. What we have decided to do is hold a virtual experience. So that'll be the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, which is October 20th, 21st, and 22nd. So stay tuned. It'll be on the cyberhouston.org website. It will also be published on our Facebook pages and possibly on our other social media pages. But we will have tremendous content for everybody during those days, and that's going to be our during Cybersecurity Month. So we will be bringing a lot of fresh content with our assets. We have a question that came in from Facebook, and I don't know if you really want, if you're on this topic or not, but if I'm just hoping that we can push it out there and see, have you had an occasion to assess the relative security of ISA 100 and wireless HART-enabled devices, or the most current implementations utilizing Wi-Fi?
Yeah, most are utilizing Wi-Fi, just because when you go back and you have to replace wiring, you have to go and do that, it's a lot more expensive. And that's why one of the reasons that they don't really, it's kind of like it works and it's been working for 30 years. So we're going to let it continue to work. So the HART was something that came out, I think that was back in the early 90s. It was a particular protocol. And so back then, a lot of like Honeywell came out with One Wireless, which was the first wireless, or one of the first wireless devices. And the problem was that the wireless was, as you went on, you can't, the wireless was built into the device, and so you couldn't alter it very easily at all. And so after a year or two, when it became obvious that that was very hackable, so you couldn't really use that anymore. And so the HART-enabled devices that are out there, and there's different standards associated with the protocols and things, which the reference to the ISA 100. But what they're doing now, the current Wi-Fi that are in these devices, and they've learned over time, that it's modifiable. So not only can we utilize these devices now in a safe and secure manner, but once you, like WPA, that's hackable, right? So they went to WPA too, and they go to the different wireless protocols and how secure those are. Well, as technology continues to go and we can get more and more packets and we can do a lot more faster processing, or we can do faster processing of things, then those protocols get broken down a lot faster and they become where basically they become obsolete. And so that's the problem with a lot of the older devices. A lot of that became obsolete. So that's why more and more people, they're not really leveraging that old protocol anymore. What they're doing is they're really looking at the newer Wi-Fi protocols because they're upgradable. So as you have new protocols come out, you can upgrade those devices and they don't become obsolete. So that was back also when I had referenced smart devices, HART and smart devices and things like that came out relatively at the same time. And Honeywell and Allen Bradley and some of the other Rosemount, those different devices, they catch on very quickly. And so when someone comes out with something, the One Wireless and Rosemount came out with it. And so, but hopefully that answers the question that what people are doing nowadays. Sorry.
So I just had a thought there really quickly. You do all of this work for oil field service companies and board of directors, etc. And when you moved and worked full-time from home, did you make any changes in your wireless or your Wi-Fi infrastructure at home?
Yeah, I'm a nerd. Was that the question?
Yes. And
yeah. So yeah, and then my friends
some of the typical things that you went ahead and made some changes because it was, it was a different norm.
How nerdy I am. I have a really good friend that's, I'm just a casual hacker for good, but I have a good friend that is very, very adept. So I had him do a pen test on the site to make sure that I'm all secure and whatever else. So I already had a good feeling that I was, but yeah. So, and I'm going to just mention that real quick that you bring that up. So with people working from home and those endpoints out there, that is one of the easiest way now for hackers, and one of the biggest threat vectors that you can have is because all of the information that people put on LinkedIn and Facebook and everything else, well, you can find out where people live pretty easily. So you know where the presidents of companies or the financial people within the companies, where they live. And what people don't realize is that if you don't change your default password, and it's a little bit better now than your devices, but some people have old devices where they're still the old Cisco admin password with admin username that they put on every single device. And they use a lot of older protocols. So all you have to do is park your car out front and hack the Wi-Fi signal with a promiscuous detector, which I guess I'm going too nerdy. But anyway, long story short, you can hack their system, right? So it's really imperative, and that's one of the things that's, as the technology and the CIO and what we're trying to do to secure our environments, we're now working with the different end users in their home environments, and so we're coaching them and helping them understand what they need to do to be secure in that, to be able to not be hacked. And you know, that's been around for a while, where if you have an outlet outside and you have a bunch of IoT devices on your net, you want to plug into the electrical outlet outside that no one knows where you are. Well, guess what? Just like they did in the casino with the fish tank, where they hacked their entire system through the thermometer that was on their Wi-Fi system, and they gained access to the entire casino's information system. You can plug into an outlet outside and you can gain certain information that way too. So it is important. There's a ton of different articles out there on it. Just type it in, how do I secure my home network? And there'll be a lot of things that you can do. And that we call that the basic blocking and tackling, which are really simple things, inexpensive, that you can do. And it saves 95% and makes that hacker go next door instead of your house. Not that you want them to go next door, but it's the, you know, that's the things you can do to secure your own environment as well. So that's really important in today's work from home environments.
Yeah, it's so important to reset that base password. And, you know, for those of us that may have, or others that may have, the same internet cable company also provide home security, for example, and you have the same password on your to access your internet services, and the internet service provider, when they first came out, set up the segments on your Wi-Fi routers and maybe created a default password and gave you a password and asked you what that password is, but they typed it in for you. They still have, and a lot of times they'll set up a default password that they set up for hundreds of homes. And then you have to log in, and you log into your home security system, you turn on your alarm or turn off your alarm from your mobile app, and it's that same password that you use to get in. So it is a huge security breach. I cannot impress upon our viewers as to how important it is to change that default password once you had the service guys come out and install your once they leave, because you need to be able to do that. And then if you give that password to your kids' friends who come in and they're all sitting down and they're gaming, you know, you need to partition that and create yourself a different segment, which is one for the kids and one for yourself, and give them different passwords. Otherwise, it's just, it can become really messy really quickly. So, you know, I mean, this has been a fabulous conversation, George. And what parting thoughts do you have for our audience today?
Just, you know, Umesh, one of the things that I've always been a proponent of is diversification within technology, from a perspective of diversified roles that each of us play within technology. So when you start looking at the role, you get comfortable in a particular role and you do it really well, you know, it forwards and backwards. Well, that's time to jump into another one. And the more challenged you are, and the more you challenge yourself to do that. And part of that too is in the networking side of things. And, you know, I would encourage everyone out there to find a good networking group and join it and be a part of that and participate and become active in your community. But those are some of the things that are really important, from being able to have a really good broad spectrum from a technology perspective. That's how you get, you know, seats at the board. That's how you become, you know, the last one of the companies that we acquired, I became president and COO. for 18 months because I've challenged myself. I'm kind of the road less traveled or against the grain kind of guy. And some people call it, I ask for forgiveness, never permission. But when you go through that process and you really push the envelope and you go into the different areas to really increase your business acumen as well as your technology ability across multiple segments, that's all I would encourage all of our viewers to participate in and to become, really challenge yourself. And if you find yourself comfortable in something, do something else.
Well, this has been a fabulous conversation, George, and thank you for taking the time and coming on and sharing your expertise and everything you do for our community and all the civic leadership activities you engage in. And you give so much of yourself and your time and your money and your resources. So, thank you for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for our viewers, we'll be posting this presentation to the CyberHouston YouTube channel, as well as to the cyberhouston.org website. Please do subscribe to our CyberHouston YouTube channel and follow our CyberHouston Facebook page. CyberHouston is a coalition of volunteer business, cybersecurity, academic, government, and civic leaders. Our goal is to continuously educate and inform business leaders on how to manage and govern cybersecurity risk. We take lessons learned from our enterprise members, distill those down into sensible economical guidance to help small and mid-sized businesses improve their cyber posture, build resilience, and become better and stronger suppliers back to the enterprise. All of our work is done through the lens of helping SMBs grow their business. This guidance comes in the form of the Business Vitality Guide, the guidance for the Board of Directors, the Cyber Preparedness Assessment, and the free Cyber Scan. All of these resources are free of charge and can be found under the Resources tab on the cyberhouston.org website. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and a special thanks again to our sponsors, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Blue Lance, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston Downtown. With that, please remember to join us on Wednesdays from 11:30 p.m. to 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time for our Cybersecurity Leadership Series. Next Wednesday, I'll be talking with Tahjar Roa Martinez, an extraordinary cybersecurity leader in Austin. She is the CEO of Cyber Warfighters Group, and I'm sure we will have a very lively discussion. See you next Wednesday. Be safe, be healthy, and have a great day.